Queerness is a place that I've come to. It's a place that where I've arrived and I'm very comfortable. I love the term. I love the fact, I believe that queerness means you and me and you and you and whoever along that binary. And I embrace it. I love it.
I am part of that generation of queer men where there's actually not a lot of us. Queer men of my age and a little bit older and a little bit younger, a lot of them are dead. You know, they didn't survive HIV and AIDS. So I think that has influenced how I view queerness, where there's this lens of tragedy that not all of us came through. And I think back to the Pride in the Park in the end of August here. And I was up on the stage at one point and I looked over and there was a young queer couple, and honestly, they were like 15. And they were in the park on a beautiful, bright, sunny August afternoon and they were holding hands. That's what queerness means to me, where people are safe enough to do that in public anytime they want.
Being queer to me is about being true to myself, being authentic as a person to other people. It means that I have the capacity to love anyone between male, female, and in between, and in transition of what that might look like. It's really about the person, the spirit, and shared values.
For me, I've always felt that there is like for so many things, there is a spectrum. And people are somewhere on that spectrum. And I want everybody to be comfortable with wherever they sit. I want everybody to be honored for who they are in the world. I don't want it to be one or the other or somewhere in between. I don't see that huge a division between me and the dragonflies that land on my hand and the birds that might perch on my shoulder. You know, we're a living species. We all have a connection.
I don't really use queer to describe myself. I think I fit in it, but that's not, to be honest, I still don't have the right word to describe who I am. There's no single word that if you ask me who am I could say. I need a bunch of words to say who I am. Part of being trans is the whole thing about identity, right? It's not, for me, it's about identity. It's not about sex or gender, really, even. Although I don't have the words to say necessarily who I am, I don't have a word. I know who I am, and that's the same with everybody else.
Being queer when I went back to Saskatoon in 1980 was pretty interesting. I had been away for 10 years because I was one of those people who had to leave, be queer, and then come back. I went straight into work in 1980, working in media, and it wasn't the safest place to be. But there was a great sense of a queer community. Saskatoon had the first federally funded gay and lesbian health center, which has gone through many iterations, but is still going very strong. When I left my media work, I went straight into AIDS work. You made friends, your friends died, and it galvanized the community in one sense and tore it apart in another sense.
My father was diagnosed with a terminal cancer when I was 14. He spent most of my teenage years dying. And when I was 17, he entered hospice at St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg. So this is 1984. HIV AIDS was still kind of this mystery, you know. There was this and in fact, for people who may not know, for a while it was actually called gay-related immune disorder. There was a young man, well, I mean, I was 17. He was older than I was, but he certainly wasn't an older adult. And he was in the room next door to my dad's. I started chatting with this guy in the room next door to my dad. And the reason I started chatting with him because I noticed no one ever visited him. So he was about 28, and he had family. He had siblings and a mother and a father, all in Winnipeg, and they wouldn't visit him. They had in fact turned him away because he had AIDS. After my father died, and after my life kind of fell apart a little bit, and I started to pick things up, I contacted Village Clinic, and I qualified as a pre and post test HIV counselor. And then I did a fair bit of work actually working with dying HIV patients. The work at Village Clinic led to some of the first harm reduction done in the city of Winnipeg, certainly not in the world, where we actually would take oranges, syringes, and saline solution and go down to the hill, because it was behind Parliament, the Parliament buildings of the hill down to the river. And I would sit there teaching male sex workers how to shoot up safely with mandarin oranges and stuff.
Who you are in terms of your sexual identity is a broad spectrum, not just one or the other. And I myself, discovered back in the 80s when I got involved with a woman and had a relationship with her for several years that, I'm not a lesbian and I'm not straight, I'm bisexual, somewhere in between. I don't care what the gender of people is. So I'm probably a minority in that way, but I have to say that when I did get into a relationship, even my family members who were pretty conservative, I never felt any hostility or any criticism from them. There may be people who have had other experiences, but mine has been really positive over the years.
To be honest, I never had any problems in this community. I've had some looks for sure and that kind of thing, but I never received anything in this community. And for that matter, neither have I in any other place that I've been living as me, as Nina. So I'm very fortunate. I know how blessed I am. But I think one of the things I come across as confident, and I think that's from my observation, if you are suddenly appearing as somebody else, you need to be confident. And that's what I've always told other trans people, is if you look like you're nervous and you don't belong, then people will assume you don't belong. And you need to be projected an air of confidence, and then people will go, oh, well, that's just somebody here. As I said, it wasn't until I came here that I started living as myself. It was, frankly, it was very terrifying in many ways. It was very isolating. There were times when I was traveling at night in my car, and I could find a very quiet place and dress in my car. But of course, then you're absolutely terrified that you'll do something and the police will pull you over and then see what you're doing. So then you need to find another really quiet place and change back into your clothes before you arrive at your door, where people could see you wearing wearing different clothes or something. I isolated myself. I did not have many friends. I didn't have a close friend, someone I could talk to about things like that for all my life. It wasn't until I met my wife, Rosalind Humphreys, that changed. She transformed my life. I knew if I had not met her where I was heading, and that was part of the reason why I wanted to start living as me, so I didn't have to feel the need to protect myself anymore.
I would say my whole adult life, I've been involved in activism of some sort. I started, a chunk of my career happened with the Victoria YMYWCA, which is a very values-based organization. And so I learned about supporting individuals different than me, and individuals who didn't have what I had. I've been in pride parades. I have been parts of groups that work to basically dismantle racism, all the isms, I've always been involved as a volunteer in my community. Being part of community is really important to me. And part of that involvement, again, I bring my authentic, true self. I live by my values, and so that means confrontation and conflict, essentially, likely in some respect. But I've always felt that with my privilege, it's part of who I am to support everybody else.
2010, I think, is when Roz, it was mainly her idea, but she started the Pride community. I thought, okay, yeah, we can do that. And that was the beginning.
I've been on the board of Pride Comox Valley now for coming up to 4 years now. And this year, 2023, we put on Pride in the Park. And it was the first one since 2019. But one of the things we decided to do to open Pride was that the chair of Pride, that's me, would say a few words. And so we did the intro. We had a territorial acknowledgement. We had the DJ just do a quick introduction of, like where the washrooms were and stuff. And then I got up and I said a few words. It wasn't much. It was just, I don't know, it was maybe 6 minutes or something. It really wasn't very much at all. But for a moment, what I realized was everybody on that stage was queer, gay, lesbian, transgender, somewhere on the gender sexuality spectrum. And we were holding the audience's attention. They were looking at us, they were paying attention to us, and they were listening to what we were saying. And sort of in that moment, I'll speak for myself, but what I realized was that that's when we were being seen, on a stage, at an event, at a very specifically queer event. And that was the only time actually where I have felt truly seen as a gay person in the Comox Valley. Both kind of excited about that and kind of sad that it took that long.
There's always been meetup spaces. Queers know how to find each other, even in a large center, a small town. There's just a sense of where it is that you can go.
I do remember back in the early 80s that we had a place in town called The Bridge, which was down at on top of the bridge going up 5th Street. And that place became, it was a gathering place for everybody in the community. But I do remember sitting there one night with some gay friends and looking around and noticing that all of us who identified as queer were sitting at one table. And over there were a bunch of guys who were working as construction workers. And there were a bunch of guys over there who were working in the logging industry. And then there were a group of women over there. So we had these little pockets of like-minded people.
There were a few things going on. There was an older queer couple. They had a house out in Puntledge Park, and they did these sort of monthly gatherings for gay men. And they were just social gatherings. We all brought a little bit of food and we hung around and chatted and visited and stuff. And then there was also a fellow, not gay, but actually opened his restaurant to regular gatherings, which went on for a few years. And then Jim and another fellow named Jeff would put on queer dances actually at the Lower Elks Hall. In the last few years, there's been a real sort of, I guess last 10 years or so, sort of a real pulling apart of the queer community. There's not as much connection as there used to be. We know queer people are here, but there's just not as much connection as there used to be.
A lot of positive queer spaces also emerged from women's spaces with the advent of the women's movement in the 70s, when women's centers were the places to go. And that was safe space for lesbians. And that is actually where I came out, was in those women's spaces in university. Unfortunately, after a few years, lesbians were no longer welcome. And there was, in some spaces, a real move to, push the lesbians out. It happened on campus. It happened on campus quite a bit in the 70s. So it's always a struggle, find your place, lose your place, find your place again. Oh, this place isn't working anymore? We'll find a place over here. I think that is slowly changing, where we can go to almost any place we want. And if you don't like it, we won't slink away. We'll just create a big fuss.
It's transformed. It's absolutely transformative. It's really so much better. One of the differences is even the prominent people in the Valley, politicians, heads of nonprofits, things like this are all aware, and all of them are not only accepting, but they are inclusive and supportive, and it's really nice to have support from the community. But it's been largely gradual, but over, I would say, the last 5 years, it's quite a difference in transformation. To see the trans flag raised in Courtenay, to see the inclusive, well, even just to get the pride flag painted in the first place in Courtenay in 2016, I personally didn't think it was going to happen. Others on the committee thought it was possible, and I mean, sure, but I didn't think that we'd get that.
I think with the emergence of gay youth and the strength of in numbers and the GSAs and queer youth support groups, there's been a groundswell, I think, of support. Also a groundswell of backlash. We are past that point where, non-queer people think that queer people are out to sleep with your children and recruit your children. I think we're past that, but now what I would love to see non-queer people doing is actively saying that they understand and they believe that queer people aren't a threat to their children. It's fine to not believe it, but we're actually at a point in our society where we actually need people to say it.
My sense is that people are more aware of the LGBTQ population, and that there is a greater space for that population, for us to be who we are authentically, more publicly. There's more acceptance now compared to when I first came out, which was many decades ago. So, with each generation, I'm feeling that there's greater space for us to be. I'd suggest that we've always been there. I don't know if there's more of us. I think there've always been as many, but that we're being welcomed more.
Queer people have gotten so many legal rights in Canada, yet we actually are still very unsafe in our communities in many, many ways. The laws are helpful when you're getting married or divorced, or when your spouse is dying, or when you're picking up your children from school. The laws are helpful in those scenarios. The laws aren't terribly helpful when you're just walking down the street or want to hold hands with your partner in Driftwood Mall.
I look around the world, even in other places in Canada, and frankly, I wonder if I would feel safe to be in other places, even in Canada, and that's sad. I haven't felt unsafe in a very long time. Since 2009, I felt safe enough to do it, and that's part of the thing. I thought I was safe, but there's a lot of hostility and violence out there, and I think it's growing.
I would like to see a space where all ages can come together. I would like to see a space or a program or whatever that teaches some history. I would like a space where I can learn something from folks that are 50 years younger than me, because I have an awful lot to learn. But I think that goes both ways.
I would like to see opportunities for people to move from, opportunities where people can lean into their fear, because that's usually what this is about, is that you're different than me. I don't know you, I don't understand you. Maybe you could hurt me, maybe you could hurt my children. So for people to move into their fear in a place that is supportive for them and learn to go to a greater understanding, having the knowledge, leaving the fear behind, shifting from intolerance to tolerance and to beyond, to full acceptance.
I think when I was on the local government committees, we made a commitment to engage with people in a really meaningful way, going out into neighborhoods and organizing events where we shared what we knew about the political process, and we empowered people. We gave them enough knowledge for them to become confident that they could bring about changes, they could speak out, their voices mattered. So I guess the one thing I'd like to see is for politicians to continue. We have some great people in the community who are engaged with lots and lots of people, and they are listening. But I would like to see that relationship strengthened.
I'd love to see more resources that do outreach to queer people in particular. Queer people have partners who die. Queer people are victims of domestic violence. Queer people need the services of agencies that provide social supports in our community. And there's very few agencies that are specifically reaching out to them and saying they're welcome and they're safe.
We're here. We might be invisible to you, but we are here. We're your teachers, massage therapists, doctors, lawyers, neighbors, aunties, uncles, childcare workers, and we're human beings, and that we need an opportunity to live our life how we are, in an environment that is as supportive, if not more, than yours.
When I first talked to my parents, and my mom and dad both thought they'd lost their son. And one of the conscious things that I made is show them, although I look visibly different, that I'm really not different. And that's, to me, is one of the things that so many people, they judge us by a single part of us. It's an important part of us, but it's actually just part of who we are. It's not the sum of who we are. It's part of who we are. And I wish people would have a better understanding.
What I'd like them to know is that it's their kids, it's their nieces, it's their nephews, it's their next door neighbor. And the reason that you don't know is because it's not safe for them to let you know. So it is your responsibility to set an example and to be open.
I would love for the non-queer community to stop thinking of us as a monolith. We're not all the same. We're different ages, we're different backgrounds, we're different colors, we're a variety of genders.
All I really hope is for us to be able to live our lives without fear. I lived with fear for so long, and I don't like the idea that anybody, for any reason, has to live with fear.
I'm enough of a pessimist to look and see, okay, this is good on the surface. I'm seeing these young, vibrant, healthy folks. But there's a bit of darkness on the horizon, I think. So we either stand together or we tumble separately.